Hey, let's dive into tonight's stories. Story 1. Hi. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass, behind some bushes, to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rearview mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was the damn hook killer, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. Fuck that, I thought to myself, so I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a fucking car, parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, hey you, get the fuck out of your car, now. I noped the fuck out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Story 2. Hi. Every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, walks slowly and casually to the other side, and then stops. This happens maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was 14, when my grandparents made me sleep in a different room on the first floor because they were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Both of their rooms are also on the first floor, by the way. A little backstory: I've always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it always freaked me out, and I still won't go up there alone. I'm 23 now, but there's one room that's worse than the rest. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on both sides, a bed roughly in the middle, and a window at the far end. When I was a kid, my grandparents told me that the sons of the previous owner claimed a gorilla would come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I didn't think much of it until I had to start sleeping in the room directly below that scary room, so everyone goes to bed. All the lights in the house are off, and I'm still awake, lying on the bed, when I hear it. Thump, thump, thump. It starts at one end of the room upstairs, comes closer, passes right above me, and continues to the other end of the room where it stops. I'm wide awake and terrified. No question in my mind, I know that rhythm. I freak out and go to my grandpa's room. I tell him what I heard, and he says the house is old and it creaks, but he turns on the dining room light for me so I feel a little safer. I try to go back to sleep, then it starts again, this time from where it ended, by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reaches the door. I think it's over, until 5 seconds later, I hear it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Silence as it reaches the landing, then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and silence again as it reaches the first floor. I'm frozen in shock. Whatever it is, it's on my floor, and the dining room light does nothing. I stare at the doorway to my room, the light shining in, and my vision starts to warp. I feel dizzy with fear, so I pull the blankets over my head. Then I hear scratching from inside my room. I know exactly where it's coming from. My grandpa's gun case. It's obvious, scratching on the wood, long scratches down the front of the case. I can even hear the door tap the frame slightly with each scratch. I try to scream and can't. I take a deep breath and finally let out a loud scream. Seconds later, my grandpa is in the room and I'm relieved. Needless to say, he still doesn't believe me. So I do what any normal person would. I drape a sheet over the side of the bed and sleep under it. I wrap myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turn my back to the door. Even if there's a party of ghosts in my room, I wouldn't know. The next morning, my grandpa tells my grandma what happened. She says, "Oh, that's silly. You know, your cousin woke me up last time she stayed here." She came into my room and said, "I hear footsteps." I sleep under the bed for the rest of the week. I've stayed there countless times since, and I hear the footsteps every time. Now I sleep on top of the bed, but I keep my back to the door and wear headphones. I haven't heard it coming down the stairs since that first night, but if I do, I don't want to know. Story 3. I posted this elsewhere, but here it goes. This isn't about me, it's about my sister. When we were kids, my sister had an imaginary friend. She said it was an older lady, really nice, and her name was E.E. She talked to her, played with her, like any imaginary friend, but around age 4, it just stopped. Fast forward a few years, when my sister was about 10, Mom wasn't home. She got a call to go to the nursing home because Grandpa wasn't feeling well, so she left quickly with Pops. At that time, my sister and I shared a room. She was in the room doing whatever, and I was at the other end of the house. Suddenly, I hear the radio in our room turn on by itself, crank all the way up, then all the way down, then off. This happened 3 times. I go in like, WTF kid, knock it off, and she's just sitting there white as a ghost. I walk over to unplug the radio, but there's no plug, no batteries, nothing, just the radio. I look at her and she says, "It was E.E. I saw her. It was E.E." I freak out and call Mom. She's upset because apparently Grandpa had just passed away. Weird, right? I drop it for a few days. At the funeral, a relative comes up and hands us a photo they found. My sister looks at it and says, "Hey, that's E.E." It was a picture of my grandparents on their wedding day. My grandmother died before I was even thought of, when Mom was 11. We live in the house Mom grew up in, and we have no pictures of her at all because my step-grandmother got rid of all of them a few years after Mom's mom passed. Story 4. Hi. When I was a kid, I lived in this really bizarre little house. It was super tall and skinny, kind of like a row house, but freestanding, with 3 floors, a basement, and an attic. It was full of weird stuff. 2 working fireplaces, a shower in the middle of the basement, a backyard so tiny you couldn't take 5 steps without hitting the fence, and an old rope pull dumbwaiter that went from the kitchen to my bedroom. I loved that weird little place, but it was super old, and half the charm was that it felt like it was designed by a bunch of lunatics who couldn't explain themselves. Eventually, the repair bills got too high for my parents, and we had to move. Getting ready to move was a pain. I packed most of my stuff myself. I'd throw things down the dumbwaiter and cram my clothes into my closet so tightly, they basically became one solid brick of fabric. While I was clearing out the closet, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a hatch to the attic in the ceiling. Being a curious kid, I opened it, stood on my closed brick, and started my first and last exploration of the top floor. The first thing I noticed was that it wasn't as dark as I expected. There were old red Christmas lights strung all over that still gave off a little glow, and a dozen little cracks and holes let me peek down into all the bedrooms below. The second thing I noticed was that the place looked like someone had been living there. The insulation was pushed aside. There was an old gurney piled with sleeping bags and sheets, and a rusty mint green fridge that still worked when I tested it. And then the bones. There were a lot of bones. I was a kid, so I didn't know much about anatomy, but there were bones of all kinds stacked into piles in the middle of the attic. Big, small, clean, white, from every kind of creature you could imagine, just thrown together in 6 or so messy clumps. 2 of them were blackened like someone had tried to burn them, and the walls near those blackened piles were smeared with dark, charred messages. Mostly, they were just smudges, but the word sorry showed up more than once. That room had been sitting right over my head for 8 years while I slept underneath it.